You ever sit at your own kitchen table and realize you're the only one who doesn't know the punchline? I was 52 years old, paying the mortgage, paying the tuition deposit for our son's community college, paying my wife's car note because she handled the groceries, and I was still being called kid by a man 10 years younger than me. And the worst part, I smiled through it, because I thought that's what a responsible man does. I'm going to tell you what happened at Dalton and Rowe, how my boss tried to ruin my career, how my wife helped him, and how I walked out of that mess with my dignity, my assets, and my legacy intact without throwing a punch or raising my voice. Before we get into it, if you like male-focused stories where the quiet guy wins with patience, receipts, and a clean strategy, hit like, share, and subscribe. It helps his last straw reach the men who feel stuck and don't have anyone telling them the truth. My name is Mark Collins. When I joined Dalton and Rowe, I wasn't chasing a dream. I was chasing stability. I'd already done the start from nothing phase. I'd worked warehouses in my 20s, drove delivery vans in my 30s, and clawed my way into operations management by being the guy who showed up early and fixed problems no one wanted to touch. By the time I was in my 40s, I could read a balance sheet, build a project plan, talk to clients, and keep a team moving without drama. I wasn't flashy. I was reliable. Reliability, I learned, is the kind of thing people love until it threatens them. Dalton and Rowe was a mid-sized consultancy that acted like a giant. Branded mugs, big slogans on the walls, town halls where leadership talked about ownership like it was a religion. They weren't terrible. The work was solid. The pay was decent. The benefits mattered. At my age, you don't gamble your family's security on vibes. You gamble on a plan. The plan was simple. Come in, do good work, move into a director-level operational role within 3 to 5 years, and finally stop living like one bad quarter could collapse my entire life. Then I met Rick Calloway. Rick was a director, and he carried himself like a man who believed oxygen was a privilege. He was loud in meetings, generous with sarcasm, and addicted to being the smartest voice in the room even when he wasn't. When clients visited, Rick turned on charm like a light switch. Firm handshake, big laugh, stories about wins that weren't his. The kind of personality that makes outsiders say, he's a leader, and makes employees say, quietly, he's a problem. I reported directly to him. That was the first mistake. Rick didn't bully people his size. He didn't pick fights with partners. He didn't humiliate senior consultants who had relationships the firm depended on. He hunted the people who needed their job. He hunted the people who had a mortgage and a family and a reputation they couldn't afford to lose. He hunted men like me. On my first day, there was no warm welcome. Rick walked past my desk, dropped a stack of reports on my keyboard like I was a filing cabinet, and kept walking. "Let's see if you're worth what HR claims," he said. Then he glanced back with a grin. "All right, kid." Kid. He called me kid for months. Not Mark. Not Collins. Kid. He did it in front of the team, in front of vendors, in front of clients, like my name wasn't worth remembering. At first I forced a laugh, because I had 2 kids and a mortgage and a wife who liked nice things, and didn't like hearing that I was having issues at work. I told myself it was banter. That's how it starts. Banter is the wrapper people use for cruelty because it keeps them safe. If you react, they say you're sensitive. If you don't, they keep going. Rick's style was simple. Humiliate someone publicly, then call it leadership. If I asked a question in a meeting, he'd smirk and say, "Use your big boy words, kid." If I delivered a report, he'd find one tiny formatting issue and announce it like a crime. Let's all appreciate Mark's innovative approach to incompetence. People would chuckle, not because it was funny, but because they were relieved it wasn't them. Fear makes adults act like schoolchildren. There was one guy in our group, Brian Mercer, mid-50s, calm, the type who never raised his voice. Brian pulled Rick aside after one meeting that left me sweating through my shirt. "You're writing him too hard," Brian said. "He's doing the work. Ease up." Rick didn't even look embarrassed. "Better he learns now," Rick replied. "Toughen him up. He'll thank me." Brian looked at me afterward like he wanted to say more. But in offices like that, kindness can be a liability. So he just said, "Keep your head down. Keep records." Records. That word became my anchor. Because here's the truth men learn too late. If you don't have proof, you don't have protection. Rick hated paperwork, hated details, hated structure. He wanted everything verbal, everything informal, everything deniable. And me? I was a structure guy. Always had been. Not because I loved admin, but because structure is how you survive when the world is unstable. So I documented. After meetings, I sent follow-up emails to confirm the agreed direction is X. When Rick demanded last-minute changes, I replied calmly, confirming you want the risk section removed. When he told me to present numbers without sensitivity analysis, I wrote, confirming you want assumptions omitted. He hated those emails. He'd lean back in his chair, grin, and say, why do you need everything in writing? You don't trust me? And I'd smile like I didn't understand the question. I trust the process, I'd say. He'd wave me off like I was annoying. But each email was a brick, and I was building a wall. At home, my wife Amy thought I was being dramatic. Amy and I had been married 17 years. We met when Amy was 28, when we were both tired of games. Or so I thought. We had a life that looked solid from the outside. Suburban home outside Asheville. 2 kids. Ethan was 17 and figuring out college, and Luke was 14 and still glued to his basketball highlights. A garage full of "we'll fix it later." A minivan Amy insisted we needed even after the kids stopped needing car seats. Amy worked in marketing for a different department in the same company. Not my chain, not my team. But close enough that our worlds overlapped. She knew what Rick was doing to me. Because she saw it. She heard the jokes. She watched people laugh. And she still told me to ignore it. You're letting him get to you, she'd say while scrolling on her phone. Just do your work and stop caring what he says. That's what women say when they've never been a man in a room where respect is currency. I wanted her to understand that it wasn't about feelings. It was about status. In corporate settings, status decides who gets promoted, who gets protected, who gets blamed. If Rick could make me look small, he could make everyone else treat me like I was small. That's how a man loses his career without ever being fired. The first real break came during a major client pitch. We were presenting to Westbridge Manufacturing. Big contract, partners present. The kind of pitch where one mistake can cost millions. The night before, Rick emailed me at 11:12 p.m. need final margin model. First thing. I delivered by 7:30 a.m. The assumptions were clear. The risk section was clean. I'd learned to be thorough because Rick loved setting traps. At the pitch, Rick presented the numbers but he stripped out the assumptions. He removed the risk slide. He made it look like certainty. The client asked a direct question. What happens if input costs rise 8%? Rick didn't know, because the sensitivity analysis was my work. He smiled like a magician. Kid, he said, pointing at me in front of everyone, answer that. My stomach tightened. If I answered honestly, I exposed him. If I answered dishonestly, I owned the lie. So I chose a third option. I opened my notebook and spoke with a calm voice that surprised even me. I can answer that, I said. But I want to clarify. The risk section and assumptions were removed from the deck. My recommendation was to include them. The room went still. Rick's grin flickered. A partner's eyebrow lifted like a warning light. I looked at the client, steady. If you're comfortable, I can walk you through the sensitivity analysis now. Rick tried to laugh it off. Mark's overly cautious, he said. That's why we keep him around. But the partner didn't laugh. Why was the risk section removed? He asked Rick. After the meeting, Rick pulled me into a side room and shut the door. His smile was gone. His voice dropped. You ever embarrass me like that again, he said, I'll bury you. Men know that tone. It's not anger. It's ownership. It's the moment a bully decides you're a threat. The next morning, the retaliation started. Rick removed me from 2 client distribution lists, then criticized me for not being in the loop. He reassigned a project I'd been leading to a junior who'd never touched the data, then blamed me when the junior asked questions. He scheduled meetings during my only open windows and then wrote, in emails, Mark wasn't available. He started telling people I was difficult. In offices, you don't hear the smear directly. You hear it in the sideways comments. The sudden change in tone. The way people stop making eye contact when you walk into a room. Brian warned me quietly. He's preloading the story, Brian said. He's making you the problem before you can speak. That's when I started doing something I hadn't done in years. I started thinking like a man in a custody battle. Not because I wanted war, but because I could smell it. And when you smell it, you prepare. 6 months later, Rick tried to finish me with paperwork. He called me into his office. HR was there. Denise Armstrong. Denise was the kind of HR person who spoke softly and watched everything. Rick didn't look at me. He looked at the folder in Denise's hand like it was a trophy. Mark, Rick said. We're putting you on a performance improvement plan. A PIP is corporate code. It means they're building a paper trail to fire you. The folder was full of vague accusations, communication issues, client readiness concerns, attitude. One incident referenced a meeting I wasn't invited to. Another referenced a call I'd been removed from. One claimed I failed to deliver analysis. I looked up calmly. Which analysis? I asked. Rick answered too fast. The Q3 margin model. You delayed numbers and put the client at risk. I nodded once and opened my laptop. 7:31 a.m. Email. Attachment. Assumptions. Follow-up note. I turned the screen slightly so Denise could see. That analysis? I asked. Denise's expression shifted, not anger, interest. Rick leaned forward, irritated. What are you doing? Answering the allegation, I said. With the record. Denise looked at me. Do you have supporting documentation for the other points? I looked at Rick and then back at her. Yes, I said. A lot. Rick tried to steer it back. Denise, don't get distracted. This is about Mark's attitude. Denise didn't even look at him. Mark, she said, can you forward me the supporting emails? For audit purposes. Audit. That word landed like a brick. Rick's eyes flashed because he understood the danger. Paperwork was his enemy. That afternoon, I forwarded Denise a clean package. Dates. Notes. Proof. I didn't include everything. I included enough to make one point unmistakable. If you come for me, you better come with facts. 2 days later, Denise emailed me. Performance plan paused pending review. Rick didn't speak to me for a week. Then he started calling me kid again. Louder. Like he could bully the fear out of the building. At home, Amy didn't celebrate. She didn't even ask how I did it. She just said, see? You made a big deal out of nothing. That was the first moment I felt something cold shift in my marriage. Because a wife who's on your side doesn't treat your survival like an inconvenience. Around that time, Amy started changing. Not in a dramatic way. In a quiet, carefully managed way. She came home later. She smiled at her phone. She kept it face down. She acted irritated when I asked normal questions. I told myself it was work stress. Men do that. We want the story to stay stable, so we bend reality to make it fit. Then one night she fell asleep on the couch with her phone beside her. It buzzed. A name popped up that made my stomach go dead cold. Rick C. 11:47 p.m. I stared at the screen like it was a weapon. My hands didn't shake because I was weak. They shook because my body knew the truth before my mind caught up. I unlocked the phone. The messages weren't romantic. They were intimate, familiar, casual in a way only people who've crossed a line can be. Inside jokes. References to nights she told me she was working late. A voice note from Rick laughing low and confident, saying my name like I was a toy. And then the line that changed everything. He still doesn't know we're setting him up. He'll sign whatever we put in front of him. Whatever we put in front of him. Not a misunderstanding. A plan. I didn't wake Amy. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't explode. I placed it back exactly where it was and sat in the dark with my heart pounding like a drum. At 52, you don't fall apart the way you do at 25. You go quiet. You think about your kids. You think about your house. You think about what a divorce does to a man who's been a provider his whole life. I thought about my father who got destroyed in court because he didn't document anything and believed love was enough. I thought about the men I'd seen at work, good men who lost everything because they reacted instead of planned. I made a decision right there, in my own living room. I would not be surprised again. The next morning, I went to work like nothing happened. Smile. Nod. Emails. Rick strolled past my desk, smirked, and said, "Morning, kid." I looked him in the eyes.
"Morning, Rick," I said.
Not loud, not angry, just calm. He frowned. He didn't like how my voice sounded when it wasn't under him. That week, I started the turning point. Not sabotage. Not violence. Not games. Strategy. Step 1 was protection. I met an employment solicitor during my lunch hour. I didn't walk in saying I want revenge. I walked in saying, I need to protect my income and my reputation. He asked what I had. I said, emails, records, a paused PIP, and a boss who retaliates when he feels threatened. The solicitor nodded like he'd heard this story 1,000 times. He said, keep everything. Don't threaten, don't react, and don't sign anything without review. That same week, I met a family solicitor because the messages on Amy's phone weren't just about work. They were about my life. The family solicitor was a woman in her 40s, with a calm voice that made you feel stupid for lying to yourself. She asked one question that hit me in the chest. "Do you have a prenup?" she asked. I laughed once, bitter.
No.
"Do you have a postnup?" she asked.
No.
"Then you need to assume she's preparing to take half of everything and then some," she said. "And if she's coordinated with your boss, you need to assume she's going to paint you as unstable." Unstable, that word again. The same word bullies use at work and in divorce. That's when I started recording. Not secretly filming people in bathrooms or anything stupid. Just legal, simple documentation. Saving texts, saving emails, journaling dates, keeping receipts. I also did something that felt humiliating. I pulled my credit report. There was a new inquiry I didn't recognize. Then another. Then I saw it, a home equity application. My home. My signature. And the signature looked like mine, but it wasn't mine. My throat went tight. Amy wasn't just cheating. She was moving money. She was trying to turn my own house into leverage against me. I didn't confront her. I called the lender. I asked for documentation. I asked for timestamps. I asked for identity verification logs. They got nervous. They promised to investigate. That promise was another brick. Now I understood the full picture. Rick wasn't just humiliating me at work. He was coordinating with my wife to hit me where men bleed. Assets, reputation, and parental rights. So I built the countermove. At work, I joined a cross-department compliance review group. Boring title. Zero glamour. Total access. It put me near Denise in HR and a compliance analyst named Arun Patel, quiet, methodical, the kind of guy who didn't care about office politics. Rick called Arun paperboy behind his back. Arun didn't react. He just kept finding facts. One afternoon, Arun asked me a simple question. "Did Rick authorize the assumptions change on the Westbridge model?" he asked. "He told us verbally," I said. Arun nodded once. "Do you have it in writing?" My stomach dipped, because if compliance was asking, that meant leadership was already worried. That night I sent Rick a neutral confirmation email about the assumptions change. No accusations. Just summary. Rick replied with one word. Handled. That reply was the stamp. 8 weeks after that, the evidence stack was thick. Rick submitted expenses without receipts. He billed personal dinners as client development. He pressured juniors to massage numbers to match his narrative. Not enough to get arrested. Enough to get fired if leadership couldn't ignore it. And Bella, Rick's niece, who worked in marketing, used corporate cards like they were personal. I didn't gossip. I didn't threaten. I built a timeline. I built a package. At home, I tightened my life like a man preparing for winter. I opened a separate account in my name only and routed my salary there, legally, after speaking with my solicitor. I documented household bills and what I paid. I photographed valuables and recorded serial numbers. I checked our joint accounts daily and took screenshots. I talked to my sons carefully, no drama, no adult mess, just steady presence. Because in divorce, the kids feel the temperature even when you hide the fire. Amy noticed the shift. She tried to provoke me. She'd pick fights over nothing. She'd accuse me of controlling her. She'd say things like, "You're acting weird lately. Are you okay?" I kept my voice even. "I'm fine," I said. Inside, I was furious. But fury is fuel, and I was saving mine for the right moment. Then Rick handed me the move that forced my hand. On a Tuesday afternoon, he called me into his office. No HR. Just him. He shut the door, leaned back, and smiled like he owned the building. "I hear you've been sniffing around compliance," he said. "I'm on the review group," I said. "Assigned." Rick's smile widened. "Let me be clear," he said. "Men who make noise don't last here." Then he slid a document across the desk. Termination notice. 2 weeks severance. Role redundancy. Corporate language for, "I'm cutting you before you can hurt me." He slid another document next to it. A standard agreement. Broad confidentiality. Non-disparagement. A clause that would gag me forever. Rick tapped the page with his pen. "Sign this today," he said, "and we keep it clean." My heart hit once, hard. Not because I was scared of losing my job. I was scared of losing timing. If I signed, he'd bury me legally. If I refused, he'd smear me. Either way, he wanted me to react emotionally so he could frame me. So I did the only thing bullies can't stand. I stayed calm. "I'll have my solicitor review it," I said. Rick's smile twitched. "You're overcomplicating," he said. "It's standard." "Then it can wait," I replied. His eyes narrowed. Clean out your desk by end of day, he said. Okay, I said, and walked out. The office felt different when people realized Rick had finally handled me. Some people avoided eye contact, some looked guilty, some looked relieved it wasn't them. Brian came to my desk and spoke quietly. This is wrong, he said. It's fine, I told him, and my voice sounded steady even though my chest felt tight. I packed slowly. Mook, family photo. A cheap plant I'd kept alive out of stubbornness. As I left, Rick stood by his office like a security camera, watching to make sure I actually went. He thought the story ended with me walking out carrying a cardboard box. He didn't know I'd already moved the board, because the week before, I'd handed Denise a sealed envelope, not an accusation, a risk concern. Inside was a summary of policy breaches with references to company records, expense logs, approval chains, risk notes, no stolen data, no drama, just a map, and one final line. Given retaliation risk, I request this concern be reviewed under whistleblower protections. That line mattered. It forced the firm to treat it seriously, because now they had legal exposure if they ignored it. The morning after I was fired, I did 3 things. First, I met my employment solicitor and sent a formal letter declining to sign any agreement without review. Second, I filed the report through the ethics hotline with the same documentation references. Third, I filed for divorce. Not because I wanted to destroy Amy, because I needed to protect my assets and my kids. Filing first matters. Men learn that too late. It sets the tone. It sets the jurisdiction. It sets the narrative. He acted calmly and legally, not violently and emotionally. When Amy got served, she called me from her car, voice tight. What the hell is this? She demanded. Are you trying to ruin us, embarrass me, or both? I kept my voice level. I'm protecting myself, I said. You're overreacting, she snapped. This is insane. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I didn't ask why, because I already knew why. By 10 a.m., my phone was vibrating nonstop. Rick calling, Denise calling, numbers I didn't recognize. Then a text from Amy. Why is HR asking me questions about Rick? What did you do? I stared at the screen and felt a grim satisfaction that wasn't joy, but balance. I replied. Nothing illegal. Just the truth. That afternoon, Brian called me and spoke low. You didn't hear this from me, he said. But finance is panicking. Denise pulled Rick's expenses. Compliance is looking at approvals. Leadership is closing doors. I sat back in my chair at home, listening to my own breath. For the first time in 2 years, the system was watching him instead of me. Then came the call that meant the building was on fire. James Rowe, one of the name partners, emailed me directly. Mark, please call me. Name partners don't email you unless something is burning. I called. James's voice was calm, controlled, like a man used to crises. Mark, he said, I'm told you raised a concern about Rick Calloway. Yes, I said. I've reviewed the initial materials, he said. They are substantial. We need you to come in and provide context. No, I said. Silence. I continued, calm. Everything I have is already in your possession. It's documented. If you need clarification, we can do it by phone with my solicitor present. James exhaled once. Understood, he said. You should know Rick has been placed on leave pending investigation. Placed on leave. Translation. The king has been told to sit down. James added, there may be an opportunity to reinstate you. I'm not asking for that, I said. Then what do you want? He asked. I answered honestly. A workplace where a man can do his job without being publicly humiliated for sport. James paused. Fair, he said. That night Amy showed up at the house. Not the front door. The garage door keypad, like she still belonged there. When I opened the internal door, she looked furious and frightened at the same time. Mark, she started. You don't understand what you're doing. This is going to ruin people. You mean Rick? I asked. She swallowed. You're being vindictive. You're making it worse. I looked at her and felt something heavy and calm settle in my chest. You were sleeping with my boss, I said. Her face changed, not remorse. Calculation. It wasn't like that. She said quickly, you've been distant. You've been. I raised my hand. Stop, I said. She actually stopped. You watched him humiliate me, I said. You defended him. And you still chose him. This marriage is over. We'll handle the house and the kids legally. Her voice turned sharp. You can't prove anything, she said. And if you spread rumors, I'll tell people you were abusive. There it was. The threat every quiet man hears when a woman realizes she's losing control of the narrative. I didn't flinch. I'm not spreading rumors, I said. I'm documenting reality. Then I closed the door. The next morning, the office didn't explode with shouting. It exploded with whispers. HR walking fast. Partners closing doors. Then the firm-wide email hit. Rick Calloway has resigned, effective immediately. Resigned as a mask. It means you're leaving before we fire you publicly. But it didn't end there. Compliance found patterns in Rick's expenses. A finance contact had been rubber-stamping approvals. Multiple juniors came forward with stories they'd kept buried. And then the client call came in Westbridge. The same client from the pitch. They'd found inconsistencies between what was presented and what was documented. The partners needed someone who knew the truth and could speak with precision. Brian told them my name. James Rowe called again. Mark, he said, we need you back. I didn't rush. I didn't sound hungry. I sounded professional. Under what terms? I asked.
Name them, he said.
So I did. Different division. Different director. Formal protection from retaliation. A written development plan. And an internal review of bullying complaints going back 5 years. Because Rick wasn't just a one-man problem. He was a culture that tolerated him. James listened. Then he said, agreed. I came back on Wednesday. Not as a defeated man crawling back. As a man with leverage and options. The building felt different when I walked in. People looked up. Some nodded. Some looked away, ashamed. Some looked relieved. The loud bully was gone, and the quiet man had returned with paperwork behind him. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I answered out of habit. Rick's voice came through, hoarse and tight.
Mark, we need to talk.
I didn't gloat. I didn't insult him.
No, Rick, I said.
He exhaled sharply. You did this. You did this, I replied. I just stopped covering it up. Then I hung up. At home, the divorce moved like slow machinery. Amy tried to play victim. She told friends I was cold. She told her sister I was controlling. She tried to suggest I was emotionally unstable because I kept records. My solicitor didn't react to her feelings. She reacted to facts. We had screenshots of the equity application. We had lender logs. We had joint account withdrawals that lined up with hotels. We had her texts threatening to call me abusive if I spoke. The judge didn't care about drama. The judge cared about documentation. Amy's story started collapsing quietly, the way lies do when they hit paper. The custody schedule reflected the truth. I was the steady parent. I took Luke to practice. I handled Ethan's tuition paperwork. I paid the bills. Amy had curated photos and vague accusations. By the time mediation ended, I kept the house. Amy got a fair settlement, not a jackpot. The equity application triggered an investigation with the lender, and Amy's appetite for creative financial moves disappeared fast. Rick's reputation didn't just die in the building. It died in the industry. A resignation in consulting is not clean when partners stop returning your calls. Vendors stop replying. Recruiters go quiet. People remember the word investigation. And people who used to laugh at your jokes pretend they never knew you. That's what men like Rick fear. Not prison. Irrelevance. A month after the resignation, James Rowe asked to meet with me. We sat in a small conference room. James looked tired. Mark, he said, we let Rick go unchecked because he brought in revenue. We told ourselves it was his style. We were wrong. He slid a document across the table. Updated anti-bullying policy, clearer reporting, protections with real consequences. This is going live firm-wide, he said. And you're joining the group implementing it. Then he said something that mattered more than policy. The board wants accountability, he said. Not just Rick. The people who enabled him are being questioned. That's real consequence in corporate life. Not yelling. Not revenge fantasies. A spotlight that doesn't move away. 2 weeks later, I got the promotion I'd been denied for a year. Approved directly by a partner. Written scope. Clear reporting lines. Not a favor. Not hush money. A real role. I stared at the offer letter and felt something tighten in my throat because for years, I'd been trained to believe I deserved less.
Why me?
I asked. James didn't flinch. Because you proved something, he said. The quiet people aren't weak. They're the ones who keep the place from collapsing. 6 months later, I sat at my new desk in a different division, reviewing a project plan. Brian had been promoted too. The atmosphere was calmer, less performative, more professional. Not perfect, offices never are, but better. At home, the house felt quieter, not empty, quieter. Luke adapted faster than I expected. He's 14, he wants stability more than speeches. Ethan, the older one, surprised me. One night he sat at the kitchen table, looked at me and said, "I'm sorry I didn't see it." I didn't ask what he meant, because I knew. He meant the disrespect. He meant the way Rick treated me. He meant the way his mother treated me. Men like my son learn their model of adulthood by watching their father. I told him the only truth that mattered. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small to keep themselves big, I said. And don't ever confuse love with loyalty. He nodded like a man storing that lesson for later. Sometimes, the legacy you protect isn't money. It's the example your sons watch when your world collapses. When I walked past Rick's old glass office now occupied by someone else, I felt something I didn't expect. Not triumph, not revenge. Completion. Because my goal was never to destroy him for fun. It was to stop him from destroying me. If there's one thing I want any man listening to take from this story, it's this. You don't have to be the loudest man in the room to win. You don't have to throw punches to break a bully. You don't have to scream to be dangerous. Sometimes the strongest move is the quietest one. Document, plan, protect your assets, protect your kids, then let the system do what it was designed to do. Once the right people can't unsee the proof. My name is Mark, and this was The Last Straw. If you enjoyed this story, please be sure to leave a comment, like, share and subscribe.